Champions League greatly distorts national leagues. I think this is the case across Europe, and it is a problem. At this point, we also have to admit that in all leagues, some will have more resources than others. It's impossible for it not to happen. The problem lies in how big the distance is between them, not just as a matter of fairness, but directly concerning the interest in the tournament. If there is no real competition between the teams, it's really hard for it to be appealing to the audience. If not, let's ask ourselves how much remains in the day-to-day of France's Ligue 1, a championship fully dominated by PSG for quite some time. Perhaps the best reference to measure this gap is the value of the squads that make up each national championship. If we look at Scotland, the reality is that the top two have a ridiculous advantage. While Celtic and Rangers exceed the €100 million mark, the six bottom teams do not even reach 10% of that figure. There's no way they can compete with them over a year. The result is obvious. The Green Ones have won 13 of the last 14 seasons, only losing the 2021 championship to Rangers. Now, let us compare that with the Premier League. There, we also find some clubs.
I think in the near future, no one is participating in the Champions League from Scotland other than Celtic or Rangers.
Are stronger than others, but with more nuance. The most expensive squad, Arsenal's at €1.31 billion, is only 5.3 times larger than Burnley's, which sits at the bottom, not 34 times like in Scotland. More importantly, there's no free fall anywhere on the chart. Almost half the league has the tools to genuinely compete for the title. That is the true value for a national tournament, having competition and avoiding obvious matches where the gap is so large that it's not worth watching because the winner is already known. The big question is, how can we correct the structural advantage that the Champions League provides in certain countries? First of all, we must be clear that under no circumstances do the leagues want to lose those slots, even though there is that difference between their teams. Being there generates two very important things. On one hand, it grants enormous visibility. A large part of the world doesn't watch a single Celtic match, except for those played in the Champions League. Clearly, ENDF wouldn't have made a video about Bodo Glimt if they weren't participating in European competitions. On the other hand, it is also a great incentive for clubs to raise the bar in the pursuit of achieving that goal. Some people might go too far and then have problems, but that's better than having no intention at all. Now, regarding the gap, to lessen the impact, some could propose that those teams that participate should at least share a percentage with those who don't, something that clearly won't happen, so we take it out of the possibilities. The one who does have some power to change things is UEFA itself. It ultimately determines how the funds are distributed. Of course, it needs various agreements with the clubs, but it can reach an overall solution. One option would be to reduce the minimum guaranteed payment for Champions League participation, those 25 or 30 million we mentioned earlier. This way, underperforming clubs that qualify through the national quota would see smaller rewards and less of an edge over their domestic rivals. The downside is that it would widen another gap between Europe's powerhouses and the rest of the continent. If everything leans towards results, the strongest will tend to take a larger share, thus increasing the disparity at the continental level. The last available option, which is indeed being carried out, is for UEFA to give money to teams not participating in its tournaments. Something quite counterintuitive. In one of its reports, the Union of European Football Associations made it clear, reducing financial gaps also reduces sports gaps and opens UEFA competitions to a maximum number of member associations and clubs. This is how the famous solidarity payments were born, funds from continental events explicitly aimed at teams that did not participate in them. This reduces the pool to be distributed among those who did qualify. Specifically, in 2025 to 2026, the organization expected to allocate up to 10% of the €4.4 billion it earned through the three competitions. That represents a significant increase from the $175 million of 2024, clearly marking it as an issue to address. Denis Vujicic, Secretary General of the European Club Association, said, "In terms of numbers, I would say that in most countries, especially in the minor leagues, top division clubs will be very happy with the benefits they will enjoy from this new solidarity solution." Charlie Marshall, CEO of the European Club Football Organization, formerly ECA, also made it clear. The main goal and the reason there has been such a significant increase is to ensure that we are doing the best we can at the European level to maintain competitive balance within the national leagues. Now, does it really work? Is it enough to solve the issues? If we want to answer this, we need to do some calculations and understand how the money is distributed. The first thing UEFA did was limit the amount received by the Big Five. England, Spain, Germany, Italy, and France will each receive up to 10 million from this solidarity fund. From there, the figure decreases. According to data from 2024, the next country on the list was Denmark. with 7 million euros. Other leagues like Portugal, Austria, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Scotland also range between 5 and 7 million. Let's focus for a second on Scotland so we can relate it to the data of Celtic, Rangers, and company. This country received 6.9 million euros through the Solidarity Fund, which, if we exclude the clubs that participated in European competitions, must be distributed among 9 clubs. This means that, on average, each will receive 768,000 euros, or, if you want to put it in millions, 0.77 million. And there's the problem. The number represents just 16% of what Aberdeen charged for the Conference League. 4%, that's what Rangers got for the Europa, and only 2% in Celtic's case, who played in the Champions League. How can we expect these funds to balance the scales? They are just a drop in the bucket. While the figure seemed promising at first, the final impact ends up being marginal. Maybe the problem is that it gets diluted among too many teams. If the league could concentrate it into 2 or 3 of them, betting that they compete with the top ones, it might have a more significant impact. Clearly, this is not an option. For the other 9 clubs to get the same as Aberdeen in the conference, UEFA should not distribute 6.9 million in Scotland, but 44 million, 6 times more. Unfortunately, if we extrapolate that calculation to the rest of Europe, the Solidarity Fund would need to be 2.2 billion euros instead of the 440 million we currently have. And that eventual number would already represent 50% of all the revenue collected by UEFA. In other words, half of the money would go to teams that do not participate in the events.
Yeah,
This,
I don't
even if
think
UEFA
that's
were in favor,
realistic.
is also not an option. It would have a huge economic impact on those who actually compete for the Champions League trophy, leading to opposition from the big clubs. Let's remember that it is they who, at the end of the day, put on the show and allow UEFA to raise such a large amount of money in the first place. Therefore, the outlook is not very favorable. The small and medium leagues face a huge challenge. On one hand, the European spots are vital for their economic development. But, on the other hand, they create a superpower effect where 1 or 2 teams dominate for a long period of time, negatively affecting competitiveness. This leads to the local event positioning itself as a sort of warm-up for the Champions League. What do you think? What should the solution be? We read your comments, and don't forget to check if you are already subscribed to the channel. See you next time.
What do you think? How can this problem be solved, or do you think the UEFA should just leave it as it is? Leave your comments in the comment sections, and if you like my reaction, please give me a like. If you didn't like it, tell me what I can do better next time. Thanks for watching. See you later.